Dreamscape presents Death by Chocolate Malted Milkshake by Sarah Graves, narrated by Susan Boyce. 1. Flailing his arms wildly, Eastport, Maine's local bad boy, Toby Moran, flew out the front door of the Rubber Ducky Bar and Grill as if shoved hard from behind. Or possibly he'd been kicked. Staggering, he snarled something ugly over his shoulder at the waterfront drinking establishment he'd been ejected from. Then he stumbled unsteadily through the gathering dusk toward the paved path overlooking the harbor and the fishing pier beyond. I watched from my seat at one of the big round tables by the front window in the Pickled Herring on Water Street across from the Duck. Around me, the savory aromas of roasting, grilling, and sautéing mingled with whiffs of seawater drifting in through the open front door. Outside, it was a lovely, late spring evening, the kind that often lured unwary visitors into buying old houses here. Right now, in fact, a pair of them strolled unsuspectingly, hand in hand on the other side of the Herring's window. "Architecturally unspoiled," I heard one of them saying in reverent tones as they went by. "And so affordable," the other agreed brightly. Yeah, and there's a reason for both those things, I thought, sipping my Irish coffee and remembering the days when I, too, was as innocent as a little lamb. Back then, I'd bought one of the big old houses here, then spent years fixing it up. Not to mention nearly every penny that I'd possessed. But there'd been little choice, since the house, 14 rooms, 48 old double-hung windows, 8 fireplaces, and an L, all covered with white clapboard and topped by a roof so full of holes that it could have doubled as a spaghetti strainer, showed every sign of being ready to fall down on my head. Which it still might. Old houses are sneaky, it turns out. But at the moment, I had a different problem. "I'm just not ready to throw in the towel yet," my friend Ellie White said. She pursed her lips determinedly around the straw in her tall drink. "Not ready to give up and close the little chocolate-themed bakery business we'd started together a little over a year earlier," she meant. It's what we'd been discussing before I got distracted by the action across the street. Now I turned from the Rubber Ducky's flashing yellow neon sign and the shadowy path behind the place, under the building's metal fire escape stairway where Moran had gone. "Ellie," I began, "I know it's hard. It is for me, too. I really hate the idea of closing the shop, but I'm not sure we have a choice. The problem being that, as usual at the end of a long winter in down East Maine, right now ready cash around here was extremely scarce, and that went double for our own bank account. But we could still squeak through, with just one big order," she insisted, brushing a long curl of strawberry blonde hair back from her face. Ellie had violet blue eyes, thick dark lashes, and a sprinkling of gold freckles on her nose, which, like the rest of her, was cute as a button. Ordinarily, she was the jeans and t-shirt type, but for our dinner out tonight, she wore black leggings, a bright red leotard top, and a smock-topped cotton dress with purple rickrack around the neckline. The dress itself, a vibrant, some might even call it eye-popping, shade of pistachio green. "I mean, couldn't we?" she implored. The rest of her outfit included soft black ballet slippers with bright, multicolored fake jewels on their toes, feathered earrings, and a gauzy pink scarf with lots of sparkly stuff woven into it to tie back her hair. What can I say? She liked dressing up when we went out. "And we've even got the order," she added coaxingly. "A wedding cake with all the fixings." "Right, but we haven't been paid for it yet, or for any of the ingredients either, and—" I stopped as the fellow the Pickled Herring had hired for entertainment began tootling on his flute. For one thing, it seemed rude to go on talking when he was playing, but also I could see that for now, at least, Ellie's mind was made up. "Let's discuss it later," I said, while outside the big front window, evening thickened into night. Now I saw only my reflection in the glass. Long, narrow face, a dimpled chin that has been fairly accused of jutting, deep-set eyes. Atop it all, unruly tendrils of short dark hair went wherever they wanted. Also, there was a new wrinkle just there by my right eye. Oh, good, I thought sourly. Still, my looks hadn't scared any small children so far, and I seemed to have made some good friends and even acquired a family, one way and another. At the large table in the restaurant with me and Ellie now, for example, were all the rest of my immediate kin, and Ellie's too. I'll tell you more about them later, but in my big old house alone we had 4 generations ranging from elderly to infant. Which meant that the house could get hectic, and often did. But like I say, never mind that now. We just can't give up, Ellie repeated, mostly to herself. Then she sucked up some more of her drink, not even making a face, much less falling dramatically to the floor with both her hands clutched to her throat, coughing and gagging. Which is what I would have been doing. Her beverage of choice was a mixture of Moxie, a Maine-made soft drink that tastes like some bitter old-fashioned medicine, and Allen's coffee-flavored brandy, a beverage that many, if not most, Down East Mainers insist really is medicine. Then, "Hey, Ellie?" I said. From his high chair between my son Sam and his wife Micah, their baby Ephraim waved his rattle at the window, grinning toothlessly. Ephraim liked flute music. He liked restaurants, and most of all, he liked being with other people. I looked again where he was gesturing and, "Ellie?" I ventured once more. The Rubber Ducky's murky yellow neon sign blinked on and off in the bar's front window. "Duck, duck, duck." But she didn't hear me. "I mean, so we're out of cash," she was saying. "That's bad. And even with the wedding cake money, we'll still just barely be able to pay all our current bills. I know that, too." She turned to me. "But Jake, the season is just beginning." Tourist season, she meant. That brief period in the summer when people from away come to spend money here in Maine. Some even make it all the way to Eastport, 3 hours from Bangor. Light years, or so it seems, from anywhere else, and about as far down east as you can get without crossing over into Canada. But I wasn't thinking about the tourists either. "Ellie," I persisted. "Isn't that Andy Devine over there, coming out of the Duck?" The guy just now leaving the bar across the street was tall and broad-shouldered, wore a dark blue poplin jacket and slacks, and had wavy, coppery hair the color of a new penny. Under the streetlight, he glanced around briefly, shrugging his jacket up, then strode off into the night much more steadily than Toby Moran had. Same direction, though, toward the gloom behind the Duck. But by the time Ellie looked, he was gone. So, back to our problem, which obviously she wanted to talk about now instead of later. "Jake, we've got to do something," she said. "If we could just make it through the next month." But we couldn't. "Ellie, we've gone through our options." And found out we didn't have any. I thought, but didn't add. She knew. "And we can't put our own money into the shop anymore either," I said. "I'm tapped out, and so are you." Sighing, she drank more Moxie with Allen's brandy in it, while, around us at the table, the rest of our party enjoyed less fraught conversations. Well, less fraught for us, anyway. "Disable the poor guy's impeller," said my husband, Wade Sorensen. Wade's a big man, burly and built like a lumberjack with blonde, brush-cut hair and pale eyes that are blue or gray, depending upon the weather. "Geez," said Ellie's husband, George Valentine. He was a small, dark-haired fellow in his 40s whose stubborn chin and banty rooster way of carrying himself gave him a feisty appearance that he more than lived up to. "The impeller. What a dirty trick," he said of the case of marine vandalism that Wade was telling him about. I agreed with George, because an impeller is a boat's water pump, and without one, the engine cooks to death. And for a lot of people in Eastport, where fishing for scallops, lobster, and shrimp is among the few good ways of making a living, no engine meant no boat, no job, and no income whatsoever for the foreseeable future. Which, coincidentally, was pretty much the situation that Ellie and I were facing, minus the watercraft. "Ellie, the light bill and the insurance are already overdue," I said. "What we needed was an impeller that pumped money." "We've paid our suppliers, though, right?" she wanted to know. Our sources for chocolate and our other baking ingredients, she meant, and for our rent. Meanwhile, the rest of our party was readying to go, Wade digging out his wallet, and the waiter looking pleased when he saw the tip. "The small businesses like ours," Ellie went on as we got up, "none of them are getting stiffed, are they?" The flute player on the stage finished up and set the flute in its case. "No," I conceded. I knew this because it was my job to pay the bills. "Don't worry. We're still current with our local suppliers." Because, for one thing, we wouldn't have been able to hold our heads up around town if we weren't. "But I'm not sure," I warned Ellie, "how long even that can continue." "Not long at all, if something good doesn't happen pronto," I added silently as we made our way to the door. I'd paid this month's rent with the last of what few crumbs I could scrape up out of our business checking account. But when next month's came due, I had no idea how we would manage it, which was why I was arguing against getting that far. On the sidewalk outside, my elderly father, Jacob Tiptree, gazed around happily, his stringy gray ponytail snaking down his flannel-shirted back, and his ruby ear stud glinted under the street lamp. Nearby, Sam and Micah busied themselves with the baby, settling him into his car seat. Behind them, Bella Diamond, my housekeeper, and also my dad's wife, and yes, I do know it's complicated, gave them pointers on how to do it. Luckily, the young parents loved Bella to pieces and were good-natured besides. Nearby, Wade and George still chatted animatedly together. Sighing, I turned to Ellie again. She'd worked very hard at our little business. It was important to her, and the truth of the matter was that we weren't yet completely doomed. Not quite. "You're right," I said quietly to her. "That wedding job could save us, if everything went perfectly. That is, it could bridge the gap between the poverty of winter and the relative prosperity of an island summer in Maine. If we could make it until then." Ellie beamed at me. "Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you see that. I knew you would," she added confidingly. "If it doesn't, though," I cautioned, "or if we have any other setbacks at all, our baking business is history." She replied, gazing across the street past the fish pier and the boat basin to where a big white full moon spread its silvery reflection on the bay. "Pretty," she murmured, and it was, too, with the lights from the little houses on the nearby island of Campobello shining steadily across the water, and a bell buoy clanking faintly out there somewhere, familiar as an old friend. But even then, something about the evening made me feel uneasy, as if, despite the lovely Maine scenery and the reassuring presence of family and friends, something nasty was lurking, something dangerous, maybe even deadly, something evil. And as it turned out, I was absolutely right. Soon after my friend Ellie White and I opened our small downtown bakery, the Chocolate Moose, we began offering chocolate milkshakes. Partly, it was because no one else in Eastport was selling them, but mostly, it was that Ellie had found a gorgeous old milkshake mixer at a local church sale and wanted to try it. The mixer was shiny mint green with 4 stainless steel spindles that you snapped the metal mixing containers onto. It was a vintage item, You could tell by the solid materials and good